Hello, and welcome back to Ebon Whisper. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoyed chilling tales that speak in the Ebon Whisper, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. Growing up, the pond held as many memories as it did water. In the summer, I caught frogs along the muddy bank and kept them in plastic buckets until my mother made me release them. In the winter, I scraped frost from the ice with my sleeve so I could look down at the fish resting beneath the frozen surface. They seemed suspended in time, barely moving, waiting for spring to return. There were family picnics beside that pond, long Sunday afternoons, and evenings when fireflies floated over the water like tiny stars. There were also baptisms, a lot of baptisms. Those are the memories I like least, but they are the ones I remember most clearly. My father would stand waist deep in the water, wearing an old white shirt. My uncle stood beside him, helping people down the slippery bank. Someone would sing, someone else would pray. Then Dad would place one hand behind a person's back and lower them beneath the water. When they rose again, everyone cheered. Back then, the pond still smelled like a pond. It smelled like wet mud, weeds, fish, and warm summer rain. It was not a pleasant smell, exactly, but it was natural. It belonged there. Most people assume I grew up to be some kind of hardcore Bible preacher. I cannot blame them for thinking that. My father was a pastor. Both of his brothers were pastors. My grandfather had been a pastor. According to family stories, there had been preachers on my father's side for at least 5 generations. Religion was not simply part of our lives. It was the family business, even if no one liked calling it that. For a while, I believed I would become a pastor too. When I was little, I copied the way my father spoke during sermons. I stood on a chair in the living room, held a book in one hand, and shouted about salvation while my mother smiled from the kitchen. As I grew older, however, I watched faith turn into something uglier. My father and his brothers began disagreeing about everything. They argued over money. They argued over church expansion. They argued over television, donations, and what counted as spreading the gospel. My uncles, John and David, wanted bigger buildings, more seats, professional cameras, and a ministry that reached beyond our county. My father believed they were turning the church into a business. Sometimes I agreed with him. Other times I noticed that his anger seemed to have as much to do with pride as it did with faith. Whenever the arguments became serious, I was sent to the front porch. The adults need to talk, they would say. That phrase usually meant my father was about to yell. I sat outside while their voices pushed through the screen door. I could never hear every word, only pieces. Money, expansion, broadcast rights, donations, grandfather, legacy. When the shouting became too much, I walked down to the pond. My mother was usually there already. She never liked the arguments inside the house. While my father and uncles fought over sermons and money, she sat beside the water and waited for people to come. Some visitors wanted prayer. Some filled jars with pond water because they believed it was blessed. Others simply wanted someone to listen to them. My mother never asked why they came. She greeted them, held their hands, and tried to help. The last time I heard the words "the adults need to talk" was also the last time the pond smelled normal. I was 17. I sat on the porch steps, pretending not to listen, when my father shouted something so loudly that every word came through the door. Why don't you dig Dad up while you're at it? He's probably tired from all the turning in his grave. I froze. It sounded like my father's voice, but the words felt too cruel to belong to him. Then he shouted again, "Get out of my house." The screen door flew open. My uncles stormed onto the porch and headed toward their trucks. Large gold letters on the sides read St. Montanus Baptist Ministries. John did not look at me. David glanced in my direction, but his expression was hard and angry. They climbed into their vehicles and drove away so quickly that dust filled the driveway. I do not know what came over me that day. Maybe it was because I was 17 and believed I had a right to understand my own family. Maybe I thought I could fix something. I never got the chance to try. My father stepped onto the porch. He did not look angry anymore. He calmly opened and closed the screen door once, testing it as if he wanted to make sure my uncles had not damaged it. Then he stared down the driveway at the disappearing dust clouds. My mother came up behind me. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder, guiding me toward him. My father kept his eyes on the road. "You're 17, Elijah," he said. His voice had changed into the slow, steady rhythm he used during difficult sermons. "You'll graduate in the spring. Your mother and I know you've been looking at colleges out of state. We know you've been pulling away." He finally looked at me. The anger was gone from his face. What remained was exhaustion. "This family has a calling," he said. "Your grandfather built this church from the dirt. He dug that pond so people could wash away their burdens." Dad stepped closer and placed his hand on my other shoulder. I stood trapped between him and my mother. "There's a right way to guide people," he continued. "A humble way. You don't exploit desperate people. You don't turn the gospel into a circus." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to promise I would stay. Then my eyes moved past him and through the screen door. A stack of mail sat on the kitchen island. On top was a county notice stamped in bright red letters. "Overdue. Delinquent notice." My father was talking about protecting the family legacy, but the house behind him was being taken apart by debt. "Your uncles want a corporation," Dad said. "They want to pave over everything your grandfather built and replace it with stadium seats and television contracts." He tightened his hand on my shoulder. "I need you here. I need you to take up this responsibility when I'm gone. I need you in this work, son, but you have to promise me you won't become what they are." "Dad," I was about to ask about the county notice when the breeze changed direction. A lazy summer wind moved up from the pond. It carried a smell. It was not the usual smell of mud and algae. This was sharp, sour, and metallic. It reminded me of old copper coins mixed with rainwater that had been trapped beneath a tarp for months. I coughed. Neither of my parents reacted. My father was still waiting for an answer. Behind him, near the edge of the pond, a thin black line had appeared on the grass. It looked oily. It looked dead. I saw it and said nothing. My family did what it had always done best. We ignored the problem until it became too large to ignore. During the first week, everyone blamed the heat. My father said algae always grew during dry summers. My mother placed citronella candles on the porch and continued helping the people who visited the pond. I noticed that some of them covered their noses before walking to the water. By the second week, the smell had spread across the property. It clung to the grass. It drifted through the trees. It remained in the air long after sunset. The bullfrogs changed too. They had always been loud during summer nights, but now they hardly croaked. Instead, they hissed and attacked anything that came near them. I watched two frogs leap at a blue heron again and again until the bird finally spread its wings and escaped. At night, the smell reached my bedroom. My window faced the pond. Every summer before that one, I slept with it open and listened to frogs and insects until I fell asleep. Now, opening it allowed the stink to crawl inside. It settled in my blankets. It entered my clothes. It seemed to live inside my pillow. Sharp, sour, metallic, like something beneath the pond had died, but refused to stay buried. I started sleeping with the window closed. I could still smell it. Most nights, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the choice my father had given me. Stay and inherit a church sinking into debt. Leave for college and hope the family survived without me. Every possible choice felt like betrayal. Once again, I never got to decide when the conversation happened. One afternoon, I stood in the kitchen and watched my mother through the window. She sat near the pond with several regular visitors. They barely seemed to notice the smell anymore. They knelt beside the water and stared into it for long periods without speaking. The frogs attacked birds, squirrels, and even one another. "Elijah, we need to talk." I turned. My father stood in the kitchen doorway. "I'm not," he raised one hand. What I said before wasn't fair. I stared at him. "God didn't put you here so I could choose your future," he continued. "What changed your mind?" He smiled tiredly. "Your mother. Prayer, maybe a little humility." He leaned against the counter. "Whatever you decide, I want it to be your decision." I was surprised. If I go to college, I could work while I'm there. Maybe send money home. His forehead tightened. "Send money home?" I hesitated. "Dad," I saw the county letter. For one moment, defeat appeared on his face. "That wasn't something you should have worried about," he said quietly. "And you don't have to worry about it now." The confidence in his voice did not comfort me. "What happened? Did you find buried treasure?" A weak smile pulled at his mouth. "Something better." He looked toward the pond. "John, David, and I are bringing back the baptisms, like the old days." I thought I had misunderstood him. "The three of you?" He nodded. "No cameras, no television crews, no miracle claims, just people, the pond, and the Lord." I laughed once. It was a bitter sound. "You were just telling me they were turning religion into a circus. Nothing has changed." "It sounds like everything changed." He shook his head. "I was so busy fighting my brothers that I forgot they were still my brothers." He folded his arms. "If people start coming back here for the right reasons, they may remember what this place was built for." He looked toward the pond again. "Maybe it'll keep the family together." For the first time in weeks, my father smiled with real hope. "Can you help me?" "With what?" "Get the folding chairs from the garage." I looked through the window at the dark water. "We're actually doing this?" "We are." We carried chairs down the hill. My father whistled while he arranged them. Every few minutes, he adjusted a row or straightened the small wooden podium he had borrowed from church. He looked lighter. I felt worse. Cars began arriving before we finished. More people came than I expected. There were at least 20 of them. Some carried Bibles. Others had towels over their shoulders. They thanked my father for bringing the baptisms back. He thanked every person for coming. An old sedan arrived last. A little girl jumped out before her father finished parking. She ran toward the pond, then suddenly stopped. "Daddy?" Her father was removing a cooler from the trunk. "What is it?" "It smells strange." He laughed. "That's pond water. It didn't smell like that at Grandma's. Every pond is different." The girl accepted that and continued toward the crowd. I looked at my father. He had not reacted. My mother moved between the visitors, handing out church pamphlets and greeting everyone. She smiled and asked about their families, but whenever someone stepped too close to the edge of the pond, her smile disappeared, only for a second. Her eyes followed them until they moved back. It did not look like normal concern. She looked protective. I could not tell whether she was protecting them from the pond or protecting the pond from them. The smell rolled across the bank again. It was stronger than before. Nobody reacted. "I'm going inside," I told my father. His disappointment was clear. "Suit yourself." I walked up the hill and stood in the kitchen. From the window above the sink, I watched the crowd. My father opened his Bible. My uncles stood beside him. For some reason, I felt safer behind glass. The sermon must have been powerful. Even from inside, I heard shouting, crying, and singing. It was the kind of sound that had once filled my childhood. That day began everything. One baptism became 3. 3 became 10. Every weekend brought more cars, more chairs, more towels, more people entering the water. Every day, the smell became worse. The pond changed from green to brown. Black, oily streaks gathered along the shore. The frogs stopped making sound. The fish stopped jumping. My father either did not notice or did not want to notice. Attendance increased. Donations increased. The overdue notices stopped arriving. My father smiled again. The house seemed to smile with him. My mother hummed while she cooked. The telephone rang constantly. People stopped by just to thank my father. Everything appeared to be improving. I did not want to ruin it. Then the turtles became sick. Their shells split open in long cracks. Raw red tissue pushed through the broken sections. Fish floated upside down at the surface for hours, only to suddenly turn and swim away again. Some visitors developed red patches around their ankles. The skin peeled wherever the pond water had touched them. That was when I finally said something. "We need to do something about the pond." My father looked up from his dinner. "What?" "The pond is sick." I leaned across the table. "The smell is reaching my bedroom. The turtles are covered in sores. Fish are dying. People are getting rashes." Dad chuckled. "That's the sin leaving their bodies." He smiled at his own joke. I did not smile. His expression became serious. "Fine, I'll call someone tomorrow." He pushed his plate away and reached for his phone. "Maybe Devon's son can test the water." No, the word was quiet. My father froze. It had come from my mother. She had never interrupted him like that. He looked at her. "Honey?" She stared down at her untouched food. "Don't." "Why?" She tightened her fingers around her fork. I said, "Don't." The room became completely still. My mother slowly lifted her head. She did not look at Dad. She looked at me. Then her eyes moved toward the kitchen window, toward the pond. My father placed his phone back on the table. "All right," he said, "if it matters that much to you." Mom began eating again as if nothing had happened. No one came to test the water. At first, I assumed Dad had forgotten. Then a white cargo van arrived one Sunday morning. It did not belong to the county. A production crew stepped out. 3 men carried cameras. Another unloaded lights and microphones. My uncles climbed from a truck behind them. John saw me on the porch. Elijah. He opened his arms. Come help us unload. What is all this? He smiled. We're finally doing it properly. By noon, electrical cords covered the yard. Reflectors hung from trees. The chairs had been moved so everyone faced the pond. My father stood near the water while a cameraman attached a microphone to his shirt. He noticed me staring. I know what you're thinking. Do you? This isn't television ministry. It looks exactly like television ministry. It's outreach. I laughed. That's what you're calling it? More people deserve to hear the message than can fit beside the pond. And the cameras help? They're tools. So was the Tower of Babel. He rubbed his forehead. You sound like your grandfather. I thought that was a compliment. For 1 second, I think he wanted to agree. Then John called him. Dad walked toward the cameras. He never answered me. The filming changed everything. More people arrived every week. Churches from nearby counties contacted us. Then churches from other states. People drove 6, 7, or 8 hours to enter the pond. No one mentioned the smell anymore. Not even the little girl. I wondered whether they could no longer smell it, or whether they had decided the smell was sacred. The black stain spread along the bank. Birds stopped landing near the water. At night, the pond made a slow, gentle sound. It sounded like breathing. I argued with Dad again and again. Every conversation ended with the same words. It's outreach. It's saving people. It's what your grandfather wanted. Eventually, I stopped arguing. Not because I agreed, because no one else believed there was a problem. The cameras became permanent. Then the lights. Then the microphones. The folding chairs were replaced with long white benches. A drone began hovering above the baptisms. 6 months earlier, my father would have chased the crew off the property. Now, he smiled into the camera. My uncles called it growth. My father called it reaching people. I called it surrender. It still was not enough for John and David. One evening, they asked me to stay after everyone left. John placed a clear plastic bottle on the table. It had no label. It was filled with pond water. We have an idea, he said. I did not touch it. What kind of idea? David leaned forward. There are people who will never be able to come here. So, we bring Bethesda to them. I stared at the bottle. You want to sell pond water. Healing water, John corrected. People already take jars home. We're making it easier, David said. We want you to help. Why me? People trust you. You're the pastor's son. You could be the face of it. My stomach tightened. I thought about the visitors with red skin around their ankles. I thought about sores climbing their legs. Some had started developing scratches and wounds across their faces. Everyone blamed drugs, poverty, or poor health. Nobody blamed the water. I pushed the bottle toward them. No, John frowned. You don't even want to pray about it? No. You're making a mistake, David said. No. I think all of you already did. I tried to stop them. I called the sheriff. I contacted the county health department. I reported the pond to environmental agencies. Every conversation ended the same way. Pastor Montgomery has helped many people. We're sure there's a reasonable explanation. We'll investigate. No one came. Within a month, churches I had never heard of were advertising baptisms using water shipped directly from Bethesda Pond. People lined up. They drank it. They bathed in it. They poured it over sick relatives. They claimed it cured arthritis. Migraines disappeared. Tumors became smaller. People stood up from wheelchairs. Children opened their eyes after doctors had said they never would. Maybe some stories were false. But not all of them. That was the worst part. The water worked. Something inside it truly healed people. Every miracle brought more visitors. Every visitor brought money. Every dollar made questions harder to ask. The smell reached the nearest town. Birds began falling from trees. Dogs refused to drink from streams connected to our property. Nobody cared. Not when people were walking again. Not when grieving parents were holding healthy children. Hope is louder than reason. I learned that too late. The last time I saw my mother behaving like herself, she was sitting on the bank in her usual place. The water had risen over her shoes. She did not notice. She stared into the pond and smiled. It looked as though she were listening to someone beneath the surface. My father stood in the water performing another baptism. But he was no longer speaking about God in the same way. His words had slowly changed. The Lord provides became the water provides. The Lord heals became the water heals. The Lord calls us home became come to the water. No one else reacted. Maybe they did not notice. Maybe they simply did not care anymore. Yesterday, my uncles announced the first nationwide shipment. Bethesda Healing Water. They claimed every bottle came directly from the original pond. By the time anyone reads this, those bottles may already be in stores. One could be in your neighbor's refrigerator. There may be one inside your home. If someone offers you a drink, do not accept it. I do not know what lives beneath that pond. I do not know why it heals human bodies while everything around it dies. I do not know why people who enter it swear they feel better than they ever have. I only know that it wants to spread. And I believe it has already spread farther than anyone understands. There is one thing I have not tried. For weeks I have dreamed about drinking the water. Not because I want to. Every night, I wake with the same sentence inside my mind. You'll understand. The voice does not sound like mine. Sometimes, I dream that I am standing at the bottom of the pond. The water is black, but I can see perfectly. Roots hang down from the earth above me. Something enormous moves beneath the mud. I never see its whole body. I only see an eye opening. Then I wake with my mouth completely dry. Maybe the pond is calling me. Maybe it wants to show me how to stop it. Or maybe that is exactly what it wants me to believe. I cannot trust my thoughts anymore. The bottle is beside me now. I filled it myself before sunrise. The water looked clear when I pulled it from the pond. Now it appears darker inside the bottle. Small black shapes move through it when I hold it near the light. They look like threads or veins. My mother watched me fill it. She was sitting on the bank. She did not try to stop me. She only smiled. Finally, she said. I asked what she meant. She looked toward the pond. It's been waiting for you. Then she walked into the water without removing her clothes. She went deeper and deeper. When the surface reached her chin, I shouted for her to stop. She smiled again. Then she lowered herself beneath the water. She did not come back up. I ran into the pond after her. The water felt warm around my legs. Too warm. Hands touched my ankles beneath the surface. Not one pair. Dozens, I pulled myself back onto the bank. My mother was gone. When I told my father, he placed both hands on my shoulders. She has gone home, he said. He did not cry. He did not call the police. He returned to the cameras. Tonight, the house is quiet. My father and uncles are sleeping because tomorrow is the official launch. The first trucks will leave before dawn. thousands of bottles will be carried across the country. I thought about setting the building on fire. I thought about draining the pond. I even took a shovel to the old water channel my grandfather dug. The mud moved beneath my feet. Something under the ground laughed. I do not think the pond can be destroyed from the outside. Maybe I have to understand it first. The bottle is open now. The smell filled the room immediately. Copper, rot, dead rain, and something else. Something familiar. It smells like summer afternoons, like frogs in plastic buckets, like ice over sleeping fish, like my mother's hands wiping mud from my face. It smells like home. That is how it tricks you. If this is the last thing I write, remember what happened here. Do not make the same mistake my family made. Do not believe every miracle comes from something holy. Do not trust healing simply because you are desperate. The pond does not give without taking. I can hear water moving outside my bedroom window. The glass is closed, but the floor is wet. A thin black line is spreading beneath the door. The voice in my head is louder now. Drink, understand, come home. I am holding the bottle. My hands have stopped shaking. I am going to drink it. If it shows me how to stop this, I will return. If it changes me, do not believe anything I write next. If I disappear, burn every bottle you find. Do not pour it down the drain. Do not pour it onto the ground. Do not touch it. And if you ever pass a pond that smells like the place where you grew up, keep driving, no matter who you hear calling your name from beneath the water. Story 2. It was around 10 at night in Texas, and it was still hot enough to make the air feel heavy. Our semester was almost over, and all of us were exhausted. Classes had been harder than usual. Several people in our group were dealing with personal problems, and we all needed one night where we could sit together, drink something cold, and stop thinking about assignments. That was how I ended up at a small bar near our university with a group of friends. It was not a fancy place. The tables were old, the music was too loud, and the floor felt sticky beneath my shoes. Still, it was close to campus. The drinks were cheap, and students went there whenever they wanted to relax without traveling too far. I was sitting beside my friend M, who was 19. Another close friend sat beside her, while a third girl had pulled a chair into the small space between us. My best friend, who I will call Jay, was sitting across the table from me. Beside Jay was her boyfriend, Daryl. Daryl was 29, several years older than the rest of us. He had been dating Jay for somewhere between 10 months and a year. I had never liked him. At the time, I could not explain why. He had never directly threatened me or said anything openly cruel. He was usually polite around Jay's friends, and he often paid for her food or drove her places. Still, something about him made me uneasy. He watched people for too long before speaking. When Jay talked, he sometimes looked at her as if he were studying her instead of listening. He also seemed to know things about her that I did not remember her ever telling him. Whenever I mentioned the feeling to anyone, I worried I sounded judgmental. Maybe I was being unfair because he was older. Maybe he was simply quiet or socially awkward. I know exactly why he made me uncomfortable now. That night, Daryl was quieter than usual. He sat close to Jay, but barely spoke to the rest of us. I did not pay much attention to him at first because M was using Tinder, and the other girls and I were helping her look through the people who appeared on her screen. M had been feeling lonely for a while. She wanted a relationship, or at least someone decent to talk to, so we crowded around her phone and judged every profile like we were experts. Oh no, someone said when a man appeared holding a fish. Absolutely not. Another profile showed a woman standing beside an expensive car. She looks like she would expect you to pay for everything, one of the girls joked. Then a handsome guy appeared, and M stopped scrolling. He's attractive, I admitted. He also looks like he votes for someone I hate, another friend said. We all laughed. It was normal, stupid conversation. The kind of thing friends say when they are tired and slightly drunk and do not expect anything important to happen. Jay and Daryl were having their own conversation. Jay had rested her head against his shoulder, and Daryl had one arm around the back of her chair. Em looked at them and sighed. God, she said, I wish I had something like you two have. She was not wrong. From the outside, Jay and Daryl seemed happy together. He brought her flowers, remembered important dates, and always wanted to spend time with her. Jay smiled and began making cute poses beside him, pressing her cheek against his shoulder and forming a heart with her fingers. That was something she did often. She had a playful personality and liked making people laugh. Daryl thanked M for the compliment. Then there was a short pause. He looked at Jay and said, I've loved her for 4 years. I would hope we look adorable. The entire table went silent. I remember the exact way the noise around us seemed to fade. The music was still playing, glasses were still hitting tables, and people were still talking nearby. But none of us seemed to hear any of it. We were all staring at Daryl. The problem was simple. Jay and Daryl had only known each other for about a year. I looked at Jay, expecting her to laugh and explain that he was joking. She did not. Her smile disappeared. What? She asked. Daryl looked relaxed, as if he had said nothing unusual. Jay sat up straighter. You said 4 years. Yes, he replied. But we met last year. He shrugged. Then he turned toward her more fully and said, Jay, I should probably confess something. I loved you from the moment I first saw you on Instagram. It was a picture from your sister's birthday party. Jay stared at him. That picture was posted 4 years ago. Yeah, he said. And? I felt something cold move through my body. Jay laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was the nervous sound people make when they are hoping someone will tell them they misunderstood. What do you mean? She asked. Have you been stalking me for 4 years? Daryl hesitated. He looked around the table, probably realizing that everyone was watching him. I wouldn't put it that way, he said. That answer made everything worse. Jay began asking questions. At first, Daryl avoided giving clear replies. He talked in circles and kept trying to make the story sound romantic. He said he had seen Jay's photograph online and immediately felt that she was special. He searched through more of her social media and learned that she attended our university in Texas. Daryl had been living in Wisconsin at the time. He started saving money. Eventually, he moved across the country and rented a place near our university. All because he had seen a photograph of Jay. None of us knew what to say. Daryl smiled while explaining it, almost as if he expected us to be impressed. Jay asked how he had managed to meet her. That was when the story became much worse. After moving to Texas, Daryl had not contacted Jay immediately. According to him, he wanted their meeting to happen naturally. His idea of natural was spending months secretly learning her routine. He followed her around campus. He watched which building she entered and learned what time her classes started and ended. He discovered where she worked, which coffee shop she visited, and where she bought groceries. He knew which days she went to the library. He knew when she usually walked home alone. He even admitted that he had once waited outside her apartment for several hours. I do not know how Jay never saw him during those months. Maybe he stayed inside a vehicle. Maybe he watched from far enough away that she never noticed. Perhaps she had seen him once or twice, but had not remembered because he was still a stranger. Eventually, Darrell placed himself somewhere he knew she would be. He started a conversation. Jay believed they had met by chance. Their entire relationship had been built on a meeting that he had carefully planned after watching her for years. Darrell continued calling it romantic. He said things like, "I knew we were meant to meet, and I just wanted to make sure the moment was right." Every person at the table looked horrified. Jay asked whether he had photographs of her from before they met. He refused to answer. She asked whether he had ever entered her apartment without permission. He became defensive. "That's not fair," he said. "I've always treated you well." "That isn't what I asked," Jay replied. The conversation became tense. Darrell looked around at us and seemed annoyed that nobody was supporting him. He accused us of making the situation sound worse than it was. According to him, people traveled across the world for love all the time. He said he had simply known what he wanted and had been willing to work for it. One of my friends said, "You memorized her class schedule before she even knew your name." He did not respond. Eventually, Darrell said he had to leave for work later that night. I still do not know whether that was true or whether he realized he had lost control of the situation. Before leaving, he leaned toward Jay as if he wanted to kiss her. She moved away. The look on his face changed for only a second. It was small, but I noticed it. The friendly expression disappeared, and something angry showed beneath it. Then, the smile returned. He told Jay he would call her later and walked away from the table. We waited until he was completely out of sight. Then everyone began talking at once. What the hell was that? Did he really just admit to following you? "Jay, you need to get away from him." Jay was shaking. She kept repeating, "Oh my God," while looking toward the door. It did not take much effort to convince her to end the relationship. The problem was deciding what she would do afterward. Jay no longer felt safe returning to her apartment. She had already been planning to move. Most of her important belongings had been placed in a storage unit because she had been preparing to live with Darrell. Thankfully, Darrell had never gone to the storage facility with her. As far as we knew, he did not know where it was. Jay still had to remain in the area until the semester ended, and she needed somewhere to stay after breaking up with him. "I don't trust him anymore," she said. "There's still a lot of the semester left. I just need to stay with one of you for a while." How dangerous could he really be? None of us wanted to answer that question. We had all heard stories about obsessive partners who became violent after being rejected. We knew that leaving someone could be the most dangerous point in an abusive or controlling relationship. None of us wanted to leave Jay alone. At the same time, none of us felt safe bringing her to our homes. I am not proud of what happened next. We drew straws. It sounds horrible now. Our friend had just discovered that her boyfriend had been stalking her for years, and instead of immediately volunteering, we turned her safety into a game of chance. But we were scared. Each of us understood that wherever Jay went, Darrell might follow. I remember reaching for a straw and thinking, please let it be one of the long ones. I pulled the shortest. "Damn it," I said. Everyone looked relieved except me. Jay gave me an apologetic smile. I was angry, but not at her. I was angry at Darrell, the situation, and myself for feeling frightened when my friend needed help. Jay collected the few things she had with her, and we walked to my car. During the drive to my apartment, she kept looking at me. "You're tense," she said. "I'm fine. You don't look fine." She offered to drive, but I refused. My hands were tight around the steering wheel, and I wanted to reach home as quickly as possible. Jay was being kind the entire time. She apologized repeatedly and said she would not stay longer than necessary. She never offered to go to another friend's place, but I could not blame her. Everyone else had clearly been relieved when I drew the shortest straw. We had been driving for several minutes when I noticed a truck behind us. At first, it was far enough away that I did not worry. Texas roads were full of trucks. There was nothing unusual about one traveling in the same direction. Then I turned onto another street. The truck followed. I turned again. It stayed behind us. It began getting closer. The headlights filled my mirrors. I looked at Jay. She had noticed it too. Neither of us said anything at first. When we were only 1 or 2 blocks from my apartment, the truck moved directly behind my car. I could barely see its front grille through the rearview mirror. I passed the turn leading to my building. Jay looked at me. "Why didn't you turn? That truck has been following us." Her face became pale. I asked, "Does Daryl drive a truck?" Jay swallowed. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "I honestly don't know if anything I know about him is true anymore." That was not reassuring. I drove past my apartment and continued through the neighborhood. The truck remained behind us. Whenever I sped up, it sped up. When I slowed down, it slowed down. After 5 minutes, there was no longer any doubt. We were being followed. Jay began crying. I was close to doing the same, but I forced myself to keep watching the road. "Is that him?" I asked. "I don't know." Jay reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Call the police. My phone is dead." I checked mine. The battery had died too. "Where is the nearest police station?" she asked. "I don't know." "What do we do?" I had no answer. "What the hell do we do?" she repeated. Her voice became louder. Then she said my name. "What the hell do we do?" The truck moved even closer. For one terrible second, I thought it would hit the back of my car. I remembered there was a lake nearby with a railway crossing on one of the roads beside it. I had no real plan, but I hoped a train might come and separate us from the truck. It was a stupid idea. If no train came, I would be taking us toward a darker and more isolated part of the area. But I was panicking. I turned toward the lake. The truck followed. The road became quieter. There were fewer houses and almost no other vehicles. The lake appeared on our right, black under the night sky. A thought entered my mind and would not leave. If the truck hits us here, we are going into the water. I drove faster. The truck matched my speed. Jay kept looking behind us. "He's still there," she whispered. "I know. What are you doing?" "I have an idea." "What idea?" I did not answer because I was not sure it was an idea at all. Then I saw the railway lights begin flashing. The crossing bells rang. The barrier arms started lowering. For the first time that night, I felt hope. The truck was still close behind us. The barrier was already moving down. I pressed the accelerator. Jay looked forward and screamed, "What are you doing?" We crossed the railway tracks only seconds before the barrier blocked the road. I heard the train horn. The truck stopped on the opposite side. For a moment, I pulled over. Both Jay and I were crying and breathing hard. The train passed between us and the truck, its metal cars shaking the ground. Then my brain finally caught up with what was happening. "Why are you stopped? The driver could turn around or find another crossing." I pulled back onto the road and drove toward my apartment as quickly as possible. We checked behind us constantly. The truck did not return. When we reached my building, we rushed inside and locked the door. Jay placed a chair beneath the handle. Neither of us slept properly. Every sound outside made us sit up. A car door closing. Footsteps in the hallway. The elevator moving between floors. We kept the lights off and stayed away from the windows. The next afternoon, I called in sick. I knew I might have been overreacting, but I had a terrible feeling that my cat, Mittens, was not safe in the apartment. If Darryl had followed us close enough to learn where I lived, he might try to get inside. My mother lived around 2 hours away, farther than Jay's parents, but I decided to take Mittens there. I ordered a ride to my mother's house because I did not want Jay left alone while I drove my own car away. After arranging for another friend to sit with her, I placed Mittens in his carrier and left. My mother asked what was wrong, but I only told her that something strange had happened and that I needed Mittens to stay with her for a while. She looked worried but agreed. By the time I ordered a ride back, it had started raining. The rain came down hard, turning the road shiny and covering the ground in mud. It was still early in the morning when I returned to my apartment building. Jay was sleeping inside, and the friend who had stayed with her had left shortly before I arrived. As I entered the stairwell, I noticed muddy footprints. At first, I assumed they belonged to another resident. Then I looked more carefully. The prints continued up the stairs. They were large, probably made by heavy boots. I followed them to my floor. The footprints continued down the hallway toward my apartment. My chest tightened. They stopped 2 doors away from mine. A folded piece of paper had been attached to the door of another apartment. An elderly woman lived there. I had spoken to her a few times in the hallway. She usually woke up late, and because it was still early, I doubted she had seen the message. I walked closer. The muddy prints ended directly in front of her door. I pulled the note free. There were only 4 words written on it. "I will find her." The moment I read them, every hair on my neck rose. I looked down the empty hallway. The building was completely quiet. I hurried toward my apartment. Only after I locked the door behind me did I understand how foolish that had been. If Darryl had left the note on the wrong door, he had probably been searching for us. If he was still inside the building, running directly into my apartment, had shown him exactly where Jay was staying. I called the police immediately. They searched the hallways and the stairwells, but found nobody. The elderly woman said she had not heard anything during the night. No one else in the building had seen a strange man. The muddy prints ended at her door and did not continue back toward the stairs. The police took the note, but they could not prove Darryl had written it. Jay tried calling him later from a friend's phone. The number was disconnected. When she contacted his workplace, they told her he had never been employed there. The apartment address he had given her belonged to someone else. Even the last name she knew him by may not have been real. Jay stayed with relatives for the rest of the semester. She changed her phone number, deleted her social media accounts, and moved to another city after graduation. I moved out of that apartment, too. For several months, nothing else happened. Then, one night, I received a photograph from an unknown number. It showed Jay walking across a parking lot in her new city. The picture had been taken from inside a vehicle. Beneath it was a short message. "You cannot hide her forever." I called Jay immediately. She did not answer. I called the police in her city and gave them everything I had. By the time officers reached her apartment, the door was open. Her phone was on the kitchen table. Her purse, shoes, and car keys were still inside. Jay was gone. There were muddy footprints on the floor. They began beside the open front door and ended in the center of her bedroom. There were no footprints leading back out. Daryl has never been found. Neither has Jay. I still think about that night at the bar and the moment he proudly told us that he had loved her for 4 years. We thought he had accidentally confessed to being a stalker. Now I wonder whether it was an accident at all. Maybe he wanted us to know. Maybe the entire relationship had reached the point he had planned from the beginning. Sometimes I receive calls from unknown numbers. Nobody speaks when I answer. I only hear slow breathing on the other end. I always hang up. Last week, another note appeared beneath my door. The handwriting matched the first one. This message contained only 5 words. You should not have helped her. Story 3. Everything started after my uncle died. He had lived alone for as long as I could remember. He never married, never had children, and rarely spoke about his private life. He was kind to me in his own quiet way, but there was always something distant about him, as though part of him had remained locked inside a room no one else was allowed to enter. When he died, I learned that he had left almost everything to me. I was his only niece, so I received his savings, investments, and several valuable belongings. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life, enough to pay off my debts, leave my parents' house, and begin living on my own. My parents did not like that idea. They insisted I was too young. I had just turned 23, and according to them, I had no idea how difficult it was to own a home. They warned me about mortgages, repairs, property taxes, and the dangers of living alone. I listened politely. Then I ignored them. I had spent my entire life doing what other people expected. I went to the schools my parents chose. I worked jobs I hated because they seemed responsible. I stayed close to home because they worried whenever I traveled. After my birthday, I wanted something different. Now I finally had the money to make that happen. I began looking at houses far away from my hometown. I did not want an apartment in another crowded city. I wanted space, silence, and the freedom to make mistakes without my parents appearing at the door to save me. Eventually, I found an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee. The closest town was small enough that everyone seemed to know everyone else. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by fields, trees, and more silence than I had ever experienced. It was old and somewhat outdated, but I fell in love with it immediately. It had 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The master bathroom had a large jet tub that looked expensive, despite being several years out of style. There was a wide porch at the front and a smaller one at the back. The kitchen had wooden cabinets, a deep sink, and windows overlooking the field. To me, it felt like a mansion. The realtor spent most of the tour pointing out the flaws. The roof would need work within a few years. The pipes were old. The house had no central air conditioning. Some of the floors were uneven. I barely listened. There was something about the place that felt like it was waiting for me. The thing that finally convinced me was a cheap wooden sign hanging in the hallway. It said, "It's never too late to live happily ever after." It was probably something purchased from a craft store, but when I read it, I felt as though the universe had placed it there for me. My parents continued protesting. I bought the house anyway. For the first few weeks, everything was wonderful. I unpacked slowly, painted one of the bedrooms, and bought furniture that did not match because I liked each piece individually. I spent mornings drinking coffee on the porch and evenings listening to insects in the fields. I had never felt so independent. Then I found the rules. They were written on a folded piece of yellow paper inside one of the kitchen drawers. The handwriting was neat but faded. Never let a guest stay overnight. Always wear protection at night. Do not sleep with the window open. I read the list twice and laughed. I assumed the previous owner had left it as a joke. The second rule seemed especially strange. As a lesbian, I had never bought condoms in my life, and I did not plan to start because of a mysterious note in a kitchen drawer. I had always been stubborn. Whenever someone gave me a rule without explaining it, part of me wanted to break it immediately. I placed the paper back in the drawer and forgot about it. The first rule I broke was the one about the window, although I did not do it on purpose. Tennessee in August is difficult to describe to anyone who has not experienced it. The heat does not simply surround you. It sticks to your skin, fills your lungs, and follows you into every room. The farmhouse had no central air, and the old ceiling fans moved so slowly that they seemed decorative. One night, I spent hours turning from side to side in bed. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and every breath felt hot. Eventually, I gave up. I opened the bedroom window. The breeze that entered felt wonderful. Cool air passed over my skin, and for the first time all night, I felt comfortable. I did not think about the list of rules, not until much later. I had almost fallen asleep when I noticed something at the end of the bed. Two small eyes glowed in the darkness. They were low to the floor, just beyond my feet. At first, I thought an animal had entered through the window. Maybe a cat, raccoon, or possum had somehow climbed inside. The eyes remained still. They did not blink. I tried to lift my head, but I was too exhausted. My body felt heavy, and my thoughts were slow. The eyes watched me. Then, I fell asleep. I did not remember what I had seen until breakfast the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal when the image suddenly returned. The glowing eyes. The dark shape at the foot of the bed. My spoon slipped from my hand and struck the bowl. For several minutes, I remained frozen. Then, I told myself it had been a dream. Living alone in a new house had made me nervous. The heat had disturbed my sleep. My tired brain had created something that was not there. I closed the window that evening. I did not see the eyes again for several weeks. The heat continued getting worse. Eventually, I bought a window air conditioning unit for the bedroom. It was loud, ugly, and difficult to install, but once it began running, I nearly cried with happiness. The machine turned my room from a sauna into a refrigerator. I slept beneath a thick blanket while the rest of the house remained hot. I joked to myself that I was a forgotten stick of celery enjoying life in the back of a crisper drawer. For several nights, I slept perfectly. Then, I woke in the middle of the night covered in sweat. The room was hot and silent. The air conditioner was off. I climbed out of bed and pressed the power button. The machine turned on without a problem. I assumed I had accidentally switched it off before sleeping. A few nights later, it happened again. I woke in the heat. The machine was off. This time, I knew I had left it running. After the third incident, I searched online for possible causes. I read about electrical problems, damaged outlets, and overloaded circuits. I called a local electrician. He arrived the next afternoon. He was friendly, talkative, and a little too interested in my personal life. He inspected the outlet, the air conditioner, the wiring, and the main electrical panel. After almost an hour, he told me everything seemed normal. The visit cost me $150. There has to be something wrong, I said. It turns off after I fall asleep. Maybe you are turning it off yourself. I am not. You could be sleepwalking. I argued with him for several minutes. Finally, he asked whether anyone else had noticed the problem. I live alone. He looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled and said he thought I was cute. I told him as plainly as possible that I was a lesbian. To my surprise, he laughed. I know. That embarrassed me more than it should have. How? He pointed at the carabiner clipped to my belt loop and then toward the Subaru parked in the driveway. I told him those things did not automatically mean anything. Still laughing, he pulled out his phone. He showed me several photographs of a woman around my age. That is my sister, he said. She is bisexual. I was asking for her. I should have refused. Instead, I gave him my number, partly because I was embarrassed that he had understood my sexuality so quickly, and partly because his sister was beautiful. After the electrician left, I decided to prove that I was not sleepwalking. I bought a small camera and placed it on the nightstand. I connected it to an app on my phone and aimed it toward the bed and the air conditioner. The first night, the video showed nothing unusual. I slept. The machine continued running. The next several nights were equally normal. I began feeling foolish. Then, more than a week later, I woke to the feeling of something touching my foot. No, not touching. Licking, a wet tongue moved slowly across the bottom of my foot. My first instinct was to pull my leg away. I could not move. My body was completely frozen. I could breathe, but only barely. My eyes moved, but my head would not turn. Sleep paralysis. I had experienced it once as a teenager, although that episode had lasted only a few seconds. This was different. Something was at the end of the bed. I tried looking down. My feet blocked my view. The wet pressure continued. There were quiet sounds near my toes. Breathing, swallowing. Something almost like pleasure. I felt sick. I tried to scream. My mouth would not open. I fought to move one finger, one toe, anything. Nothing happened. I remained trapped inside my own body while the thing continued touching and licking my feet. Eventually, darkness returned. I fell asleep again. The next morning, I woke covered in sweat. The air conditioner was off. I jumped out of bed and turned it on. Then I searched online to see whether sleep paralysis and sleepwalking were connected. Most sources said they were very different problems. Sleep paralysis happened when the mind woke while the body remained asleep. Sleepwalking happened when the body moved while the mind was still sleeping. I could not find anything suggesting one person might regularly experience both. Then I looked at the bottom of my foot. There were bite marks. Small, deep impressions surrounded the heel and arch. They were not human. I panicked. I grabbed a hammer from the tool closet and searched the entire house. I opened every closet, checked beneath every bed, and moved dressers away from the walls. I looked in the attic, the pantry, the bathrooms, and the storage room. I was ready to strike anything that moved. I found nothing. Later, I posted photographs of the marks online. The answers were not helpful. Several people said I had been bitten by a bat and needed rabies shots. Others accused me of biting myself to get attention. That would have required flexibility I did not have. Then one user posted a photograph. It showed the end of her bed. The caption said, "It bites me too. Make sure you wear socks as protection at night." Behind the woman's feet, two small eyes glowed in the darkness. A thin black shape crouched at the end of the mattress. The image brought back the memory of my first night with the window open. I had seen the same eyes, the same shape. I ran to the kitchen and opened the drawer. The list was still there. Never let a guest stay overnight. Always wear protection at night. Do not sleep with the window open. Protection did not mean condoms. It meant socks. I was about to call the realtor and ask for the former owner's information when my phone rang. "Hello?" A woman spoke. "Hi. My brother gave me your number. Sorry to call you unexpectedly. It has been a long time since I met another woman who likes women around here." She paused. "Let's be friends." Silence followed. "Oh, God," she said. "Please forget I said that." I laughed. That was how we met. She was even more attractive in person. She was several inches shorter than me and much more feminine. Her long brown hair moved around her shoulders as she walked. She spoke quickly, laughed easily, and seemed unable to remain still. She was funny, bright, and strange in a way I liked. She insisted on opening doors for me because she wanted to be chivalrous, even when the door belonged to my own house. Our first date took place at the farmhouse. We drank beer, ate pizza, and talked for hours. By the time we settled onto the couch to watch a movie, she could barely keep her eyes open. Her tired mumbling was adorable. I gently poked her cheek. "Are you falling asleep? What does it look like?" She did not even open her eyes. "You should probably go home." That woke her. She sat up and frowned. "I cannot drive. I drank. I can order you a ride." She looked offended. I did not explain the rules. I simply told her I did not usually allow women to stay overnight after a first date. That was partly true. She complained, but she eventually agreed. After she left, I went to bed. I almost forgot to put on socks. Nothing happened for a week. Then I woke one morning in unbearable heat. The air conditioner was off. My socks were missing. Fresh bite marks covered the bottom of my foot. I remembered the camera. I opened the app. The video began normally. I slept beneath the blankets while the air conditioner hummed. Then, a blurry object flew across the dark room and covered the camera lens. For the rest of the recording, the screen remained black. I heard wet, licking sounds, heavy breathing, the mattress creaking. I turned the video off. I tried opening older recordings, but they were gone. The app had been set to automatically erase footage after 48 hours. I cursed and went to check the camera. It was no longer on the nightstand. I searched the room. Nothing. When I tried connecting through the app, a message appeared. "Device too far away. Move within 100 miles of the camera." I read it several times. 100 miles. Someone or something had taken the camera far away from the house. I should have left that day. Instead, romance distracted me. The woman texted and asked when she could see me again. I slowly stopped thinking about the creature. She and I spent more time together. We went into town, cooked meals, watched movies, and spent long evenings talking. I became attached quickly. She seemed perfect. Whenever the strange things in the house returned to my thoughts, she appeared with a joke or a kiss and made me forget them. Then came the night she stayed over. It began with Chinese food and wine. She sat across from me and told stories about her job at the mall. She described strange customers, rude managers, and the small dramas between employees. I remember laughing. Then I began feeling nauseated. The room moved slightly. I rushed to the bathroom, expecting to vomit. Nothing came out. I stared into the mirror. My reflection appeared to bend. The glass shimmered, and my face stretched in strange directions. I thought I had drunk too much wine, but I had consumed less than usual. After that, my memories became broken. I remember lying on the bathroom floor. She was beside me, tickling me. At least, I thought she was. Then I remember being in the bedroom wearing only underwear. She was beside me. I tried to ask how we had gotten there. My tongue felt heavy. Before losing consciousness, I insisted that we both put on socks. She giggled. "It is too hot for socks." I remember arguing. Then, darkness. I woke the next morning alone. The air conditioner was off. The room smelled like blood. I sat up. There were 2 severed heads on the floor. One belonged to the woman I had been dating. The other belonged to the electrician, her brother. A heart had been drawn around them in blood. For several seconds, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. Then I screamed. I stumbled out of bed and struck the dresser. The camera was sitting on top of it, the same camera that had disappeared. I already knew I should not watch the recording. I watched it anyway. The video began with me sitting on the bed. I looked barely conscious. The woman and her brother entered the room. The electrician had been inside the house the entire time. They tied my wrists and ankles. Then they removed my underwear. I watched the man prepare to assault me while his sister kissed him and touched my body. They laughed. They had planned everything. The drinks had been drugged. The romance had been false. The phone call, the dates, the affection, all of it had been a way to gain access to my house and to me. Then 2 glowing eyes appeared in the corner of the room. The woman noticed them first. Her smile disappeared. A shape unfolded from the darkness. It was almost human. Almost, its arms and legs were too long. Its joints bent at wrong angles. The darkness seemed to cling to its body, making it difficult to see clearly. It looked like something humans had learned not to notice, something ancient that had survived by remaining at the edge of our vision. The creature attacked. I will not describe every detail. The camera recorded everything clearly. My attackers were torn apart while still alive. The creature moved with impossible speed. The electrician tried to fight. The woman tried to run. Neither escaped. When it finished, the creature fed. It consumed flesh, blood, and organs while I remained unconscious on the bed. Then it did something I did not expect. It untied me. It cleaned the blood from my skin. It gently dressed me. After that, it pulled the blanket over my body and tucked it around my shoulders. Its long fingers moved with surprising care. Then it crouched at the end of the bed. It lifted one of my feet. The creature licked the bottom slowly. It bit down several times. Then it disappeared beneath the bed. I stopped the recording. For a long time, I did nothing. I did not call the police. How could I explain any of it? 2 people were dead in my bedroom. Their blood covered the floor. The video showed them trying to assault me, but it also showed a creature that no one would believe existed. I imagined the police accusing me of creating the recording. I imagined spending the rest of my life trying to explain the thing beneath my bed. Eventually, I wrapped the 2 heads in parchment paper. I placed them in the refrigerator. More specifically, I put them in the crisper drawer. I am not sure why. Maybe I wanted proof of what happened. Maybe I was afraid the creature would become angry if I threw them away. Maybe I kept them as trophies, reminders of the people who had lied to me and planned to hurt me. Or perhaps part of me believed they were food, an offering. The rest of the bodies were gone by evening. Blood remained, but the flesh and bones had disappeared. I did not see the creature remove them. It simply took care of the problem. I found the list of rules again. Now I understood them. Do not sleep with the window open, because that was how it entered. Always wear protection at night, because it was drawn to bare feet. Never let a guest stay overnight, because it did not tolerate anyone sharing my bed. The rules had not been written to protect me from the creature. They had been written to protect other people from it. I thought about selling the farmhouse. I contacted a realtor twice. Both times I changed my mind. The creature had saved me. That did not make it good. It had bitten me, watched me sleep, stolen my camera, and killed 2 people with more violence than I believed possible. But it had saved me. Sometimes I wondered whether it understood what the electrician and his sister planned to do. Sometimes I wondered whether it would have killed them, even if they had been innocent. I never tested that question. I stopped inviting people to the house. I wore socks every night. I kept the windows locked. For several weeks, I did not see the eyes. Then one night, I woke and found the creature crouched at the end of the bed. The socks were still on my feet. It stared at them. I could feel its disappointment. Slowly, I removed one. The creature moved closer. Its glowing eyes softened. I do not know whether that is possible, but that is what I felt. It took my foot in both hands. Its fingers were cold and far too long. Then it began to lick. I lay still. Over time, I became used to it. That frightens me more than anything. I became used to the sound beneath the bed. I became used to the air conditioner turning off. I became used to waking with bite marks. The creature never injured me badly enough to cause permanent damage. It seemed to know exactly how much pain I could tolerate. Sometimes I spoke to it. It never answered. It only watched. I gave it a name, although I will not write it here. Names create connections, and I have learned to be careful about such things. The 2 heads remained in my refrigerator for months. They did not rot. Their skin stayed pale and cold. Sometimes I found the crisper drawer open in the morning. The heads would be facing each other. Other times one would be missing and later appear beneath my bed. Eventually, both disappeared. I assumed the creature had eaten them. I felt relieved. I still live in the farmhouse. My parents think I am lonely. They ask why I never bring anyone home. They worry I will spend the rest of my life without a partner. They do not understand that I am never alone. At night, I hear movement beneath the floor. I feel the mattress shift near my feet. Sometimes glowing eyes appear from the darkness. The creature kneels at the end of the bed like a worshiper before an altar. It holds my ankles carefully. It waits for permission. I still wear socks most nights. But not every night. That cheap sign remains on the wall. It's never too late to live happily ever after. I used to think it was about finding freedom, love, and a new beginning. Now I think it was a warning. Happiness does not always look the way people expect. Sometimes it looks like an old farmhouse, an empty road, and a monster beneath the bed. Sometimes it leaves bite marks on your feet. Sometimes it kills anyone who tries to hurt you. And sometimes, when the room becomes silent and the air conditioner turns off, I remove my socks before it has to ask. Story 4. Moving to another state was stranger than I expected. It was lonely in a way I had not prepared for. I suppose that should have been obvious. You cannot pack everything you own into boxes, drive hundreds of miles away, and leave your family and friends behind without feeling something. Even when the move is your choice, there is still a sense that you have cut yourself loose from the life you knew. My opportunity took me to Kansas. God-forsaken Kansas, as I started calling it within the first week. I moved there because of a job and because I had found a house I could actually afford. The property was unbelievably cheap, especially for its size. It sat alone between a dark forest and an endless ocean of cornfields. From the front porch, I could see corn stretching across the road until it met the horizon. Behind the house, the woods began almost immediately, packed with old trees and thick bushes. It was a beautiful place during the day. At night, it felt like I was living at the edge of the world. The farmhouse was much larger than I expected for its age and price. It was simple, 2 stories tall, with faded white boards and a wide porch that leaned slightly to one side. The roof needed work, and most of the windows looked as though they had not been properly cleaned in years. I could already imagine what I wanted to do with it. New flooring, fresh paint, modern lighting. Maybe I would knock down one of the walls between the kitchen and dining room and create an open space. My father would probably have taken off his belt if he heard me talking about changing an old farmhouse. He believed everything built before 1980 was sacred, and everything built after that was cheap garbage. The man had been born a decade or two too late and made that everyone else's problem. Still, the house belonged to me now. On my first night there, I stood alone in the living room and stared at the dirty carpet and dull green walls. Almost all my belongings were still packed inside the moving truck or stacked in boxes along the hallway. There was no furniture in the room. The only thing I had set up was a mattress on the floor of the main bedroom. It did not have sheets. I had placed a single blanket on top of it, but I was not tired. The house made small noises around me. Pipes clicked inside the walls. Floorboards gave soft groans as the temperature dropped. Every now and then, something brushed against the outside of the building. Probably a branch. Probably I tried lying down, but I could not stay still. I checked my phone, walked through the empty rooms, opened boxes, and then closed them again. I had too much nervous energy trapped inside me. The silence of the house made it worse. Eventually, I decided to go for a walk. I do not normally enjoy walking unless I am on a proper mountain trail. Walking along roads or around neighborhoods has always seemed pointless to me. That night, however, I needed to get out of the house. I did not want to walk along the road in circles around my property. Instead, I looked towards the cornfield across the street. The farm surrounded an old house that stood far back from the road. The building looked ancient, even compared with mine. During the day, I had seen part of its roof and a tall chimney beyond the field. At night, the house was almost completely hidden behind rows of dead and dying corn. I had not met the people who lived there. For all I knew, the place was abandoned. The night air was cool and clean. The heat of the day had finally faded around 10, and by midnight the temperature had dropped enough that I almost went back for a jacket. There was a faint smell of barns and animals, but it mixed with damp soil, grass, and the fresh scent that only seems to exist in rural places. Crickets sang in the weeds. Frogs called from somewhere near a ditch. Together, they created a loud, uneven music that filled the darkness. As I approached the field, a soft breeze moved through the corn. Thousands of dry leaves rubbed against one another, making a low, scraping sound. I stopped at the edge of the road. Something dark moved near the bottom of the corn. At first, it looked like a black patch of shadow. Then it shifted, and I realized it was a cat. The animal was hunting a field mouse. It crouched low to the ground with its back end raised. Its tail curled behind it, but remained perfectly still. I watched the cat move slowly forward, one paw at a time. Then it jumped. The mouse let out a high squeal. There was a brief struggle beneath the leaves. The cat's body twisted, and its paws struck at the ground. Less than a minute later, it stood with the mouse hanging from its mouth. The cat walked away proudly and disappeared between the stalks. Something about the sight made the hair rise on the back of my neck. The mouse probably had not noticed the cat until it was too late. One moment, it had been moving through the field. The next, claws and teeth were already inside it. That seemed like a terrible way to die. I pushed the thought away and crossed the road. The corn was much taller than it had looked from my porch. Most stalks rose several feet above my head. Their leaves blocked half the moonlight, and after only a few steps, the soil beneath my shoes disappeared into darkness. I knew walking into a stranger's field after midnight was not a smart idea. I had not met the owner. I did not know if the farm was active, and I did not know whether the people in that old house owned guns. This was rural Kansas. It seemed reasonable to assume they did. Still, who would be awake and watching the field in the middle of the night? I told myself I would not go far. Just a short walk to clear my head. Then I would return home and sleep. The corn leaves brushed against my arms and face as I pushed through. Some had sharp edges that threatened to scratch my skin. The rows seemed close together, and I had to turn my shoulders in places. At first, I could still hear the frogs and crickets behind me. Then, the sounds became softer. The farther I walked, the more the corn surrounded me. The farmhouse lights vanished. The road disappeared. Soon, there was nothing but the stalks, the soil, and narrow pieces of moonlight. I am not sure how long I walked. Maybe half an hour. It felt peaceful after a while. There were no cars, no voices, and no distant machinery. Even the breeze slowly died until the leaves became still. The smell of corn and dark soil filled the motionless air. That silence was probably why the buzzing of my phone sounded so loud. I pulled it from my pocket. The screen lit the space around me, turning the nearest stalks pale green. There was one message on the lock screen. It came from a number I did not recognize. "He knows you're here." I stared at it. For a moment, I thought it might be a message meant for someone else. I checked the number again. I did not know it. I did not even recognize the area code. The number began with 444. Was that even a real area code in the United States? I unlocked my phone and began typing. "Do I know you?" I had barely entered the first few words when another message appeared. "Run," then another. "Run," a third message arrived. "Run." My phone began vibrating again and again as more messages filled the screen. "Run, run, run." At least a dozen of them appeared. I stood between the rows of corn, staring at the bright screen as a chill moved across my skin. It was probably a prank. Some teenager had entered the wrong number, Or maybe the person who lived nearby had seen me enter the field and wanted to frighten me. That explanation made sense. It was late. I was tired. I was standing alone inside a dark cornfield in a state where I barely knew anyone. Of course, the messages were getting to me. I lowered my phone and looked around. The brightness of the screen had destroyed my night vision. Everything beyond a few feet looked completely black. I decided it was time to go home. I turned around. Then I realized I did not know whether I had been walking in a straight line. I thought I had followed one row into the field, but the rows were not straight. They curved. I had not noticed it while walking, but when I raised my phone and looked carefully, I saw that the planted lines moved in long, slow bends. They did not curve in one clear direction. They seemed to sweep around one another. The longer I looked at them, the more my head began to hurt. It was like trying to follow several circles that had no center. I lowered the phone and took a breath. The smell of the field had changed. I smelled perfume. It was sweet and strong, something floral and clearly feminine. Perfume in the middle of a cornfield. At midnight. I stood still, trying to decide whether the smell came from my clothes or from somewhere outside the field. Beneath the sweetness was another scent. Wet earth, rotting leaves, something old and damp. The warning messages suddenly felt more serious. I began walking in what I believed was the direction of my house. At first, I moved carefully. Then I walked faster. The corn leaves struck my arms and shoulders. Dry stalks cracked beneath my feet. Every sound seemed too loud in the still field. I had been moving for perhaps 10 minutes when I heard something else. A quiet rustling, not in front of me, not behind me, somewhere off to my right. I stopped. The sound stopped too. My heartbeat became heavy and fast. It was probably a raccoon. Raccoons would walk through cornfields. So would deer, foxes, and dozens of other animals. There was no reason to be afraid. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. He wants you. Those 3 words were worse than everything else the number had sent. Fear turned into anger. My fingers moved quickly. You think this is funny? Fuck off, dude, I sent the message. I was giving whoever it was exactly what they wanted. They wanted a reaction, and I had given them one. I considered blocking the number. Then the perfume became stronger. The smell surrounded me. It was no longer a soft trace in the air. It was thick enough to taste. The sweetness mixed with the smell of mud, dead leaves, and something rotten. The crickets and frogs had gone silent. So had the movement in the corn. I began walking faster. Soon, I was almost jogging. I kept looking ahead for the lights of my house, but the corn was too tall. I could not see anything beyond the rows. My phone vibrated again. I almost ignored it. This was a prank. I was overreacting. I had always been slightly paranoid, especially when tired. Still, I looked. Do not listen. Do not stop. The corn is watching. I shoved the phone into my pocket. The buzzing stopped. For several seconds, I felt better. Then one final vibration came from my pocket. I pulled the phone out again. Too late. A voice spoke behind me. Lost? Every muscle in my body tightened. I spun around. A man stood between the corn stalks. At least, he looked like a man at first. Most of his body remained hidden in darkness. The moonlight touched only his head and part of his shoulders. His skin was so pale that it seemed to glow. He was bald, completely bald. There was not a single hair on his scalp. No eyebrows, no eyelashes, no beard, or even a trace of stubble. His head looked unfinished. like a clay model that had not been given its final details. The ridge above his eyes was almost flat. His skin had no lines or wrinkles except for the deep marks that stretched from the corners of his eyes. They looked less like normal crow's feet and more like scars cut into his face. Those lines made his eyes appear slightly too large. Not enough that someone would notice in a photograph. Just enough to make something old and instinctive inside me whisper that I should run. He was tall, at least a foot taller than me, maybe more. I took a small step backwards without meaning to. His eyes instantly moved towards my foot. Then they returned to my face. His smile widened. The lines beside his eyes became deeper. I could swear his pupils grew larger. "No," I managed to say. My voice sounded weak. "No, I'm not lost. Just taking a walk." The man made a low humming sound. It almost sounded like a purr. The noise was deep enough that I felt it through the soles of my shoes. No, he repeated. "Just taking a walk." He copied my exact voice. Not only my words, my pitch, my tone, even the nervous break between sentences. Then he became silent. He watched me for several seconds. "You're new here," he said. My mouth had gone dry. I could not think of a safe answer. "You need to be careful in new places," he continued. "No one knows you in new places." His smile remained. "No one to notice if something bad happens." "I was just leaving," I said. I did not know what else to say. "Where are you going?" The man did not move. His lips pulled strangely across his teeth as he spoke. Then they swelled slightly when his tongue moved across his gums as if he were tasting something. I took another step backwards. Again, his eyes followed the movement immediately. His pupils widened until only a thin circle of color remained around them. "Home," I said. "I'm just going home, man." I stepped back again. My eyes tried to see more of his body. He was standing close enough that the moonlight should have revealed his chest. Instead, the darkness seemed to cling to him. "Are you sure?" he asked. The question stopped my thoughts. Home? Where was my home? I lived across the road from this field. I had moved into the farmhouse that day. What did it look like? For a few terrible seconds, I could not remember. I tried to picture the front door. Nothing. The color of the walls. Nothing. Even the faces of my parents became unclear. The man shifted forward. Moonlight touched his chest. He was naked. His skin was as smooth and hairless as his face. The center of his chest pushed forward in a sharp point. His ribs and breastbone created a shape that reminded me of a cat's chest. My thoughts remained empty. "What?" I whispered. I had not meant to speak. The man's smile opened fully. His teeth caught the moonlight. There were too many. Hundreds of small teeth filled his mouth. Each one was no larger than the nail on my smallest finger. As his lips pulled farther back, more teeth became visible. They continued into places where teeth should not have existed. "Do you know where you're going?" he asked. His naked body became clearer. The same hairless skin continued across his stomach and legs. "It is easy to get turned around in a place like this," he said. "You can stay the night." His tongue moved across the rows of teeth. "You can leave in the morning." Then he lowered himself. At first, he appeared to be squatting. He rested on his heels, watching me. Then his body continued down. A cracking noise moved through the field. It sounded like someone slowly breaking their knuckles. One joint cracked, then another. The sounds came in a steady order, traveling through his body as it folded. His knees bent outwards. His back lengthened. His arms touched the ground. He lowered himself until his chin rested against the soil. I remembered the cat. The way it had prepared to jump on the mouse. Its front lowered, its back end raised, its body waiting to spring. The thing in front of me moved the same way. Its head swayed slightly. I thought I saw its hips move in a small, excited wiggle. I ran. There was no decision. My body moved before my mind did. I turned and threw myself through the corn. My legs drove me forward with more strength than I knew I had. Leaves struck my face, arms, and chest. Sharp edges cut my skin. Stalks pulled at my clothes. Behind me came the sound of wet flesh striking the ground. Slap, thump, it was moving on all fours. The sound was too close. I had not gone very far into the field, had I? The road should have been nearby. But which direction led out? Had I turned around before running? Was I moving deeper into the corn? Panic tried to stop me. I forced my legs to keep going. The field had to end eventually. Behind me, the creature laughed. The sound was high and thin. It sounded like a toddler laughing while playing with a favorite toy. At the same time, I heard many footsteps. Not 4, a dozen or more. My shoe struck a rock. I stumbled and nearly fell. I threw one hand down, caught myself, and kept moving. Then, despite every survival instinct screaming at me not to, I looked back. The creature was bounding through the corn. Its lips had pulled so far away from its teeth that I could see the red flesh around its mouth. The skin of its nose and chin had opened with a smile. Its head moved from side to side. Every few seconds, it jumped high enough for its pale face to appear above the corn. It was playing with me. The sight sent another wave of fear through my body. I ran harder. I do not know how long I remained in that field. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been an hour. My lungs burned. My legs became weak. Blood ran down my arms from dozens of small cuts. My shirt had torn along one side. Then, without warning, the corn ended. I fell onto the side of the road. For 1 second, I lay there, gasping. Then I recognized my house. Its windows glowed across the street. I forced myself up and ran towards it. I crossed the road without looking for cars and reached my front door. I turned before going inside. The creature had not followed me across the field. The full moon covered the road and yard in silver blue light. It reached only a few feet beneath the first row of corn. I did not need to search for him. He glowed in the darkness. His pale face waited between the stalks. His lips were pressed together again, but the smile remained far too wide. Something long and thin moved behind his head. At first, I thought it was a tail. Then I realized there were several of them. They moved in the darkness like excited ropes. The creature bounced slightly in place. It reminded me of a dog waiting for someone to throw a ball. Then its head tilted. The smile became wider. I rushed inside and locked the door. After that, I stopped thinking clearly. By the time I fully understood what I was doing, the house had been destroyed. I tore cabinet doors from the kitchen and nailed them across the windows. I dragged the kitchen table into the living room and pushed it against the front door. I used shelves, boxes, and parts of an old wooden frame to block the other entrances. I moved anything heavy enough to slow him down. The house I had planned to renovate became a barricade. Something told me it would not matter. I found my pistol in one of the moving boxes. My father had insisted that I buy it before moving alone. I had laughed when he said I would need protection in the country. Now I sat in the bathroom, with a weapon beside me. I climbed into the bathtub because it was the only room without a large ground floor window. I brought bottles of beer with me. I finished 5 and opened a 6th. The alcohol did nothing to stop the shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face rising above the corn. I saw the hundreds of tiny teeth. I heard the wet slapping of its body against the soil. The pistol rested in my lap. I did not think I could shoot the creature. I was not even sure bullets would hurt it. The only thing I knew for certain was that I could use the gun on myself. That thought brought a terrible kind of comfort. If the creature entered the house, I could choose how I died. At least, that was what I told myself. I began writing everything down on my phone. If no one heard from me again, I wanted someone to know what happened. I wanted people to understand that I had not simply disappeared. If I survived the night, I planned to leave Kansas immediately. The job did not matter. The house did not matter. I would abandon everything. For a while, the house remained silent. Then I heard something move outside. A soft scrape traveled along the wall. It stopped beneath the bathroom window. I held my breath. The window was small and high above the bathtub. I had covered most of it with part of a cabinet door, but a thin section of glass remained visible near the edge. Moonlight passed through it. I stared at that narrow strip. Nothing moved. I tried to convince myself that the creature had returned to the field. Maybe it could not cross the road. Maybe dawn would make it leave. My phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. The same unknown number had sent another message. You brought him home. I stared at the words. Then I heard my own voice outside the bathroom door. No, it said softly. I'm not lost. Just taking a walk. I raised the pistol. The voice came again, perfectly copying the words I had spoken in the field. Just going home, man. Something touched the other side of the bathroom door. Not a knock. A slow stroke. Fingernails, or claws, moved from the top of the wood to the bottom. I aimed at the door. My hands shook so badly that the pistol moved in wide circles. The voice outside began humming. That deep, purring sound entered the room and vibrated through the bathtub. The bathroom light flickered. Then the creature spoke in my father's voice. Open the door. I stopped breathing. It sounded exactly like him. The same rough tone. The same tired way he spoke when he wanted me to stop arguing. Son, the voice continued. Open the door. I knew my father was hundreds of miles away. I knew it was not him. Still, part of me wanted to answer. My phone buzzed again. Do not speak. The bathroom handle slowly turned. The barricades had not stopped it. The locked doors had not stopped it. Somehow, it was already inside. The handle moved back. Then, it turned again. The creature laughed quietly. I looked towards the uncovered piece of window. Earlier, it had shown only darkness. Now there was a pale glow beyond the glass. I had believed the creature was standing outside the bathroom door, but something was also looking through the window. A white face slowly rose into view. Its head was upside down. The small teeth filled its smile. At the same moment, the voice outside the door whispered into the gap near the floor. Lost? I have been sitting here for hours. The beer is gone. The sky has not become lighter. According to my phone, it is almost 6 in the morning, but the moon has not moved. The creature keeps changing voices. My mother. My father. Old friends. People from work. Sometimes it uses my own voice. The number continues sending messages. There are dozens now. Do not open the door. Do not look into its eyes. It cannot enter unless you remember it. Forget the face. Forget the teeth. Forget the field. I do not understand how I am supposed to forget. I can see it through the window. I can hear it outside the door. The pale glow is getting brighter. A few minutes ago, another message arrived. It was different from the others. I am sorry. Then the sender began calling me. The phone is still ringing. The name on the screen is not a number anymore. It says mouse. The thing outside has stopped laughing. Now it is scratching faster. The bathroom door is beginning to bend inward. I think I understand what happened to the mouse in the field. It was not the cat that made me afraid. It was the feeling that something had been watching both of them. Something waiting to see which one would believe it was the hunter. The pale face has moved closer to the window. Its breath is turning the glass white. I can see small words appearing in the fog. They are written backwards from the other side. You noticed me. The pistol is in my hand. The door is breaking. And that glow I thought was outside earlier is not outside anymore. It is coming from beneath the bathtub. Story 5. Okay, I know how this sounds. Posting something like this in a place filled with ghost stories, strange creatures, cursed objects, and people being followed by things that should not exist is almost funny. I suppose out of all the horrors people describe here, being unable to find a romantic partner probably seems like the most ordinary thing that could keep someone awake at night. But this is not a joke. I am not trolling. I am not here to complain about dating. And none of this is funny anymore. I do not have a husband. I do not want a husband. I think that is important to understand before I explain anything else. I have never been interested in marriage. Romance has never held the same attraction for me that it seems to have for other people. I understand why people enjoy it. I am not made of stone. I have watched romantic movies and smiled at the sweet moments. I have seen attractive strangers and thought they were cute. I have even imagined going on dates from time to time. But the idea of building my entire life around another person has always made me uncomfortable. Sharing a home, sharing a bed, planning every weekend together, remembering birthdays, sending good morning messages, and asking someone what they want for dinner every single day sounds exhausting. People describe relationships as if they are beautiful partnerships. To me, they have always sounded more like having a polite parasite attached to your life. Maybe that is harsh. Maybe I am too picky. Maybe I have simply never fallen in love. Whatever the reason, I have always been comfortable with the idea of growing older alone. I have friends, I have work, I have hobbies. I may buy a few unusual pets someday. I have always thought that would be enough. Romance, as far as I am concerned, is inconvenient. That is why I was so confused when I found a second toothbrush in my bathroom. It happened about a month ago. I had spent most of the morning moving around my apartment and taking care of small jobs I had ignored all week. The laundry basket was overflowing, so I washed everything the night before. That morning, I was ironing, folding, and sorting clothes while trying not to become distracted by other messes. I am very easy to distract. If I leave one job unfinished and begin another, I may not return to the first one for hours. That morning, I nearly forgot to brush my teeth. I only remembered when I sighed and caught the smell of my own breath. It was awful. I rushed into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and grabbed a toothbrush from the holder without looking. My mind was still on the laundry. I wanted to finish quickly before I forgot about the clothes again. I put toothpaste on the brush and pushed it into my mouth. The bristles felt wrong immediately. They were rough and sharp, several of them bent in strange directions and scratched against my gums. It felt like someone had been using the brush to clean a floor instead of their teeth. I pulled it from my mouth and looked at it. The bristles were thin, damaged, and darkened near the base. It was clearly old and heavily used. That made no sense. I had bought my toothbrush only a few days earlier. Even if I brushed my teeth with far too much pressure, there was no way it could have become that damaged so quickly. I looked at the holder beside the sink. My real toothbrush was still there. It was exactly where I had left it. The brush in my hand was not mine. I dropped it into the sink. For a moment, I simply stared at it. My apartment door had been locked. Nothing appeared to be missing. There was no sign that someone had entered, but a stranger's used toothbrush had appeared in my bathroom. I know many people would probably throw it away and move on. Maybe they would blame a visiting friend or assume they had purchased 2 brushes without remembering. I could not do that. I have watched too many horror movies and read too many stories about people ignoring obvious warning signs. I have shouted at fictional characters for making stupid choices. I was not going to become one of them. That same day, I contacted the building's maintenance office and asked them to check my apartment for carbon monoxide. I know memory problems and strange behavior can be caused by carbon monoxide poisoning. I had read stories about people finding notes they did not remember writing or discovering objects they did not remember moving. Maybe I had bought the toothbrush. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe something inside my apartment was damaging my brain. The maintenance workers arrived that afternoon. They checked every room and tested the detectors. Everything was normal. There were no leaks and no unusual readings. One of the workers, an older man with a gray beard, packed away the testing equipment and nodded toward the entrance. "If you're still having the same symptoms," he said, "you and your husband should probably go to a hospital." I smiled politely. "A friend of mine thought he had carbon monoxide poisoning," the man continued. Turned out there was something wrong with his brain. I recognized the story. I was almost certain he had read it online and changed the details. I thanked both men and opened the door for them. It was only after they left that I realized what he had said. "Your husband." I did not have time to think about it because I turned around and tripped over a pair of boots. My face came within inches of the shoe rack before I caught myself against the wall. The boots were large, brown, and covered in dry mud. They looked like heavy work boots, the kind worn on construction sites. My first thought was that the maintenance workers had forgotten them. Then I remembered seeing the boots before they entered. They had been sitting on the shoe rack when I opened the door. I frowned at them. They were not mine. I did not own anything like them. My feet were too small to wear them, and I had no reason to buy work boots. The maintenance worker must have seen them and assumed they belonged to a man living with me. That explained why he mentioned a husband. It did not explain why the boots were in my apartment. After that, I began finding other things. At first, they were small enough that I could almost ignore them. There was a dark blue razor beside mine in the shower. A second towel hung on the bathroom door. A bottle of men's shampoo appeared under the sink. I found a half-empty container of protein powder in the kitchen cupboard. I had never bought it. Then I noticed the clothes. While folding my laundry, I found several shirts that were far too large for me. They had company logos printed across the front. One was from a construction company I had never heard of. Another had a small tear near the collar and smelled faintly of sweat. There were socks that did not belong to me. There was a thick leather belt. There were men's jeans. I checked every receipt and bank statement I could find. I had not bought any of those items. I searched the apartment for signs that someone had entered. The windows were locked. The front door showed no damage. Nothing valuable had been stolen. I considered calling the police, but I did not know what I would say. Someone had broken in and left clothing? It sounded ridiculous. Over the next few weeks, I began receiving strange voicemails. The calls came from numbers I did not recognize. Most of the people spoke as though they knew me. One woman congratulated you both on the good news. A man laughed and said he never thought he would finally settle down. Another message simply said, "Tell him I'm proud of him." No one used a name. I returned 2 of the calls. The first number had been disconnected. A man answered the second. When I asked who he was trying to reach, he became silent. Then he said, "Sorry, wrong number," and ended the call. Around the same time, something else changed. There was a cafe near my workplace that I visited several times each week. It was only a short walk from the office, and their coffee was better than the machine at work. One of the baristas was attractive. I did not have a serious crush on him. I did not know his name, and I had no intention of asking him out. He was simply nice to look at. Some days are so boring that you need to make ordinary life feel more interesting. For me, that meant ordering an Americano and pretending the cute man behind the counter was part of some romantic movie I did not actually want to live in. Then he disappeared. I went into the cafe one morning and immediately noticed he was missing. That alone was not strange. People quit jobs all the time. What bothered me was the way his coworkers reacted when I asked about him. I waited until the cafe was quiet, then approached a woman behind the counter. "Is the guy who usually works mornings off today?" I asked. She tilted her head. "A guy?" "Yes, the tall one. Brown hair. Glasses." She looked confused. I continued explaining, becoming more embarrassed with every word. "He's usually here around this time. He's tall and, well, kind of cute." The woman laughed softly. "I wish we had someone like that working here." Another employee walking behind her called out, "Hey." She smiled at him, then turned back to me. "Sorry, maybe you're thinking of a different cafe." "Probably," I said. I took my drink and left. But I was not confused. I knew which cafe I had visited. I had seen that man dozens of times. I remembered the way he adjusted his glasses while using the register. I remembered the small tattoo on his wrist. I remembered the exact sound of his voice when he asked whether I wanted room for cream. He had been real. Yet no one else remembered him. Home also began feeling different. The smell changed. It is difficult to describe, but everyone knows the smell of their own home. You stop noticing it after a while, but when you return after being away, there is always something familiar waiting for you. My apartment no longer smelled like mine. There was a new scent beneath everything else. Soap, sweat, wood. Sometimes there was a faint smell of machine oil. It reminded me of stories about baby animals being rejected by their mothers after a human touched them. Their scent had changed, so they no longer belonged. That was how I felt inside my apartment, like something had marked it, like it no longer recognized me as its owner. I officially lost control when I found a pair of men's underwear on the bedroom floor. They were lying beside the bed. I stared at them for almost a full minute. I had not invited anyone home. No man had been in my bedroom, at least none that I remembered. I grabbed my bag and left the apartment. Within an hour, I was sitting in the public library and searching the internet for explanations. Carbon monoxide had already been ruled out. Other possibilities were worse. Some posts described dissociative identity disorder. People could lose time and perform actions they did not remember. Others discussed neurological conditions, memory problems, or unusual sleep disorders. I tried reading medical articles, but the words became difficult to understand. Every condition seemed to include symptoms I had, along with symptoms I did not.